Welcome. Today is Tuesday, December 7th, and it is 9 a.m. I am Ann Friend, the agency's rules coordinator, and co-facilitating with me is Shannon Ball, the paid family and medical leave insurance policy lead. Thank you everyone for being available to attend the second Rulemaking Advisory Committee or RAC meeting for the Batch 2 PFMLI rules. This meeting is being recorded and will be retained as part of the official record. Further introductions will be done in just a minute after we go over some general information. Everyone is muted except for the RAC members and the Sparkly OED staff. The purpose of the chat is for technology issues only. Your questions will go in the Q&A section so that we can capture your comments and your questions. And then please indicate in the Q&A question section if you want to speak at the end. If we have time, we will take comments in the order they appear in the Q&A section of this meeting. We will unmute your microphone at that time. You're also welcome to send comments or questions to the OED_rules@employ.oregon.gov email address. This RAC meeting will be reviewing the proposed administrative rule drafts in batches as the PFMLI program develops them and prepares for the formal rulemaking process. We are scheduled for a 9 to 11:30 meeting today, and we'll take a break about halfway through. If you need to step away, please make sure to mute your microphone. Today is the second and last RAC meeting addressing the Batch 2 rules. Today, we will continue discussion and feedback received at the first RAC meeting. RAC meetings are advertised and open to the public. The purpose of the RAC is to hear from RAC members and the stakeholders they represent prior to formal rulemaking. This meeting, again, is open to the public, but the primary purpose is to have discussions with RAC members and get feedback on the proposed rules and the statements of need and fiscal impact for formal rulemaking. After all feedback is reviewed by the PFMLI staff and any changes made, if and where appropriate, we will move this second batch of rules onto the formal public process for rulemaking. For public attendees that are listening, we welcome you to listen to the committee's discussion. If you have questions regarding this batch of rules, please submit your questions in the Q&A section. For questions not related to this batch 2 rules, please send them to OED_rules@employ.oregon.gov. If we have time at the end of the meeting, we will take public comments. We will not be addressing UI or PUA benefit questions today, only batch 2 for the PFMLI rules. If we have time at the end of the meeting, again, we will address any batch 1 comments, but we are not taking formal comments on batch 1 during this meeting. Batch 1 is currently out for the formal rulemaking process and is currently in the public comment period. So please, if you would like to submit formal comments regarding batch 1 rules, submit them to the OED_rules@employ.oregon.gov email address. Okay. To introduce today's participants, I'm going to ask the Rulemaking Advisory Committee members to turn on their cameras so that I can see who all is here. And then when I call your name, if you can unmute yourself and then introduce yourself, that would be great. And we can start with Eva.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Eva Ripito. I use she, her pronouns. I work at Oregon AFSCME Counts. Sorry, I was just like, Oregon AFSCME. I was looking at the slide and it was like, wait, that's a mouthful. It's like, what is that? That's my employer. And represent a lot of state employees, local government, and we have a number of nonprofits that we represent, where we represent workforce, as well as licensed in-home childcare providers, whole range of folks. So thanks for having me as part of the RAC.
Thank you, Eva. Andrea?
Hey, good morning. Andrea Peluso, she, her. I'm the executive director of Family Forward Oregon, and we're a grassroots organization that organizes mothers and caregivers around care policy issues and took a lead role in leading a coalition to pass paid family and medical leave. And I'm on the advisory committee and happy to join for the RAC today. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. And I know I just asked this, so I'm sorry if I mess it up already, but it's Shantae.
Dante Reed, and I go by pronouns she, her, and I work for Care Oregon, which is a Medicaid managed care plan with also a Medicare line of business in Portland, Oregon.
Thank you. Jenny?
Sorry here, just a minute, it's a video. Morning, my name is Jenny Dressler and I am the small business representative on the Rules Advisory Committee. Pronouns are she, her, and I represent lots of different trade associations, many of them who are either seasonal or small employers. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Let's see on the screen, Amanda.
Good morning, Amanda Dalton. I'm the president of the Northwest Grocery Association. Our firm also represents a handful of small and medium-sized businesses in the agriculture and healthcare space. Well, glad to be here.
Thank you, Amanda. Paloma?
Hi, yeah, Paloma Sparks, Vice President for Oregon Business and Industry. We're the state's largest, most comprehensive business association, and we represent about 1,600 member businesses who employ over 250,000 people.
Great.
Also on the advisory committee.
Thank you. And I do not see Linda or Jessica, so I think we can move ahead with this. The policy leads and staff are our sparkly OED staff. We have with us that you won't see on camera. They are Andrew Warren, Jennifer Haynes, Ryan Phillips, Matt DeRosa, and Dean Johnson. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shannon so that she can get us started on the talking.
Good morning. I summarized this on last Thursday, but I'm just going to summarize again for attendees that are listening for the first time. So the Paid Family Medical Leave program is going to do 5 batches of administrative rules planned over the next several months. So on the screen is the tentative timeline for the rules, and each of the batches become final. Batch 1 rules consist of 35 administrative rules relating to contributions, self-employed election, employer size and assistant grants, and our outreach rule. We're currently, like Ann said, in the formal public comment period, which is open until December 20th at 5 p.m. If you'd like to provide verbal feedback on the Batch 1 rules, our next public hearing is this Thursday, December 9th from 4 to 6 p.m. The link to register for the next public hearing is on our website and at the end of this PowerPoint presentation. Our goal is to have the Batch 1 rules become final in January of 2022. The Batch 2 rules is what we'll be discussing today, which relate to equivalent plans and 1 rule on the definition about wages. And we plan to have these rules become final in April of 2022. Batch 3 rules, which will consist of rules related to paid family medical leave benefits and tribal governments. And those rules with our goal is to become final in July of 2022. The Batch 4 rules that relate to appeal process and will become final in August of 2022. And then Batch 5 will be our miscellaneous rules that we identify we need, or any rules previously filed that need cleaned up or consolidated. Those rules should become final in September of 2022. All 5 of these batches will be completed before the Paid Family Medical Leave program goes live. The compilation of the Batch 2 rules, we emailed the Rulemaking Advisory Committee, and we also posted them on our Paid Family Medical Leave website, so you can find them there. We received very good input on the equivalent plan draft rules at our first RAC meeting last week. And between the first RAC meeting last Thursday and today, we've thought about some of the feedback. And during the short turnaround time, we weren't able to incorporate all of it, but we have thought about several items that we're going to have further discussion on today and make sure we understand the concerns that were raised. During our conversation, please feel free to share your suggestions or comments or concerns, but also provide them in writing, hopefully by the end of the day tomorrow if possible, so we have time to review the feedback and make draft rule changes before the formal rulemaking process. With the holidays in there, it kind of shortens some stuff up. So going on, we this first batch of batch 2 rules that we went through all at the first meeting last week. We went through all 11 draft administrative rules. And today I'm just going to walk through some of the feedback we received at the first RAC meeting and provide more opportunity for discussion with the RAC members to make sure we are understanding, again, your feedback. Then we'll open the discussion up to anything else the RAC members would like to discuss about the batch 2 administrative rules or statement of need and fiscal impacts. And then after that, if time allows, we will move on to public comment period. So just a couple things on the wage definition rule. Again, I'm just going to touch on one feedback we received last Thursday at the RAC meeting was in regards to the agricultural labor definition. Remember, the definition of agricultural labor is used in the batch 1 administrative rules, specifically in OAR 471-070-0450. That wages do not include the cash value of remuneration other than cash for agricultural labor and domestic services. The concern raised during the RAC meeting last Thursday was the definition of agricultural labor in our draft administrative rule is different than from UI purposes and can cause confusion. The definition used in the UI statute, ORS 657-045, sections 3 through 6, is similar to what we use for the definition for agricultural labor, but we didn't use it exactly for a couple of regions, which I'm going to go on to explain further. And I'm going to have Dean switch to the slide again. Sorry, Dean, for making me go back and forth. So on this slide, we put together the actual text from the draft administrative rule in the first column. And then the second column is a text from the UI statute for the definition of agricultural labor. In red are the areas that are different. We didn't include in the definition services performed for state or local or political subdivision, as we felt excluding political subdivision conflicts with the other part of the paid family medical leave statute where political subdivisions are explicitly included, which is under ORS 657B 01014BA. I'm just going to pause there. That's the first difference of the two.
Can you explain, and this is maybe, I guess I don't really understand, what is a political subdivision under 657B? Or how is, like, what would that look like in the context of agricultural labor?
So this is where I was struggling, because under the unemployment one, it says it does not include services performed for state or political subdivision. And for paid family medical leave, it includes everybody. So if there is a political or state subdivision, we shouldn't be excluding them from the definition of agricultural labor for paid family, because paid family includes everybody.
Yes, no, thank you. Thanks, Shannon. Yeah. I guess I'm confused about what would constitute a political subdivision. This is maybe more a misunderstanding of what we're talking about here in red on the right versus like, just so I can better understand when I communicate that back to my members. Are we talking about like local governments? Are we talking about like?
I would think it would be local governments or state government agencies, local governments that counties, cities. That would be my understanding, but I could be wrong.
Okay, no, I think that is helpful. Sorry,
Okay.
Andrew says water bureaus.
Yeah, there's a lot of like local utility kind of political
irrigation districts. Okay, thank you.
And I just got a Teams message from one of our staff that says an example is like a city.
Yeah, I was going to say there's probably like parks or other program work that would be comparable to agricultural work that is done by government employees of various kinds, but so they would already be captured.
Does that answer your question, Jenny?
I think so. Sorry, I was struggling like what city is out there like farming. So
that's good that you asked, because I'm sure that we have attendees that were probably going, huh? So
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that and bringing it up.
I was thinking, just like well, including the water bureaus and such, but like even park rangers, or that may be doing work that somehow could be defined as farm work, but not, doing the farm work where they're selling food to go to market kind of thing, or
Shannon, is this something that either Jen or Andrew would know more specifics? Do we want to go into more specifics?
I don't think we need to go into more specifics right now. I think the purpose of this slide, and you'll recognize during my, as I go further on, of just something, food for thought for the RAC members to think about, and then provide comment afterwards as well of, oh, I do agree that we shouldn't be excluding this, or I do think we should include it in our definition, because again, on the left-hand side is the paid family medical leave definition for agricultural labor right now. And on the right-hand side is what unemployment insurance has. And so consciously recognizing we should be different, and this is why or not, and providing that feedback to me in writing would be helpful.
Okay. So if there aren't any other questions on the political subdivision, let's move forward so we stay on track.
Yeah. So the next part is in section B down there in red, where salvaging timber or clearing land or brush and other debris left by a hurricane. And we thought that this was limited just to hurricanes, which makes it different. Otherwise, one could say salvaging timber or clearing land or brush is agricultural labor if it's performed as an incident or in conjunction with other such farming operations. And so we felt excluding just hurricanes out of there was why we didn't input that language in. Questions on that? Okay, then we'll go to the next slide. Again, on the left-hand side is the same draft language, just so it's on the same slide for comparison, but in red on the right is the UI statute again, and where we are different. So subsection C talks about reservoirs and waterways not owned or operated for profit. For PFMLI purposes, we don't care if it is for profit or not for profit. And so that's why we didn't include that in here. Section D is not included in our draft administrative rule, but maybe it should be. And so I want to have some further discussion today here. In this section, I'm just struggling to think of an example of who this section actually pertains to. I believe it pertains to operators of a co-op, but the operator has to produce more than 1/2 of the commodity. And I don't even know if and this is where I'm leaning on you guys, is an operator of a co-op also a producer? And that's one of my questions to you today. And to think about in the future, we should be putting this language in there or not, or what this language even means. Thoughts, Jenny?
So I'm back looking at 3 here, and that doesn't seem to, at least you took out the ginning of cotton and then the maintenance of ditches, canals, reservoirs, or waterways. I mean, that doesn't show up over here.
Back one slide, is that what you're talking about?
No, I'm looking at little C, like,
okay.
Anyway.
The ginning of cotton or connection with the operation, or the line right above
ditches,
it.
Canals, reservoirs, of waterways. Okay. So I saw that you guys, like, the different thing that you highlighted was not owned or operated for profit. But that's like half of that section isn't even pulled in over in the paid family medical leave insurance definition. So
good point.
Anyway, just making a point because I'm a little confused trying to track this. And then on the cooperative organization, I probably have to look at this a little bit further. So in the employ of an operator or group, and other people can speak to co-op organization as well. Like co-ops are organized in very different ways. Some are retail, like ag retail co-ops. Some are commodity co-ops. Some may be like doing some of the processing work. So I guess I'll probably need to look at this more to be able to, I don't know,
Yeah, and I didn't think that you guys would come up with an answer today. I think it's just some, we'll send you the slides and just something to think about when providing your, written feedback as well. We just recognizing these are some of the changes that we recognize that weren't included in our draft rule and explaining why we didn't include them, and wanting to welcome further discussion with that.
Okay.
So moving on to the next slide, then section 4 goes along with D that we just talked about with or 3D, but if it specifically excludes cherry brining, which we didn't think was equitable just to exclude cherry brining, but maybe there's a reason it should be excluded, and we'd love just to hear about it. We are just pondering of why was cherry brining not included there. And then the next slide.
Jenny looked like she was going to make a
sorry.
comment.
Oh no, I was just gonna say I don't know. So I'm sure somebody else may be. I can talk to somebody in the cherry industry, but I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the next slide, both of these, we did not define the term farm, but maybe we should have. And so I'm just recognizing that. And then section 6, we didn't specifically include forestry type seedlings in a nursery, but again, maybe we should have. Again, these are just this definition for agricultural labor, just a reminder, is in conjunction with the remuneration other than cash an employer receives for working forestry type seedlings in a nursery wouldn't be considered wages for PFMI purposes. And so maybe we shouldn't include it, maybe we should. And so just food for thought for you guys to ponder and provide additional comments on or discussion today. Either way works for me. So I just wanted to point out those. And again, like I said, we'll send you these slides as well so you can see the difference.
Shannon, I, again, am not qualified to offer this feedback, but did get notes from Piccoon, and they don't have a representative here today. So I hope that you might be able to follow up with Linda or other representatives from Piccoon. But their recommendation is actually to go more with the IRS definition. And, we're saying, it's kind of unclear without doing a deeper analysis about the kind of agricultural work that's being done here, sort of how to get to a semi-broader definition that would count more of the non-cash remuneration, because obviously it's going to have an impact on the level of benefit that someone can apply for and receive. So anyway, I think it would be great if there was some follow-up conversation on that, because I don't know the details of this, but they were recommending a slightly narrower definition from the IRS. So, and I don't, you don't have side by side of that, so I'm not exactly sure how that's different, but.
Yeah. There's a couple of places that the IRS defines the agricultural labor, and one spot is just, it defines agriculture. It doesn't go into actual agricultural labor. And that is very broad. And so I don't know if we want, that's where we'll have to have further discussion if we want to be that broad or not, because it might be doing the opposite effect. If you include somebody that's so broad, then their benefits, they would get a lower benefit potentially if they had remuneration other than cash, because that wouldn't be considered. And so thinking of how that impacts in the agricultural labor industry.
Can I ask Andrea, would you mind sharing that language, just because Piccoon isn't here today? I would be curious kind of what the request is.
I don't have the specific definition, but if I can get it from them, I'll share it with the group.
And then Shannon, I think my general thought is, I know we're trying to base a lot of, or the agency is trying to base a lot of kind of the technical aspects of this rule on unemployment insurance, kind of in how you guys operate. If we start changing definitions, it's not going to make a lot of sense, because some farms are exempt from UI, and so they haven't done those quarterly filings, et cetera. So I guess that's the caution that I want to have, is we're not if we start kind of changing too much, or too many of the definitions that we rely on for UI, employers aren't really going to know how the changes, or I guess how to operate with those changes. And it's just something I want to put a pin in, because it's, I guess to me, like I probably need to go a lot more in depth into kind of the proposed changes. But for somebody that maybe that wasn't covered under the language on the right, who's now covered on the left, like it's just not that kind of alignment I think that the agency was striving for at the outset. And I do think it's going to be extra confusing for employers. So I just wanted to flag that.
I think also for employees too, just because like, why is it included here, not there? And so, yeah, recognizing that. Yeah. All right, well, we'll continue to have conversations about this, and I'll email, like I said, Cocoon.
I will say though that there are a number of places where we model OFLA definitions. There are a number of places where we model UI definitions. In some places it's aligned, in some places it's intentionally not aligned, because we're not held to the same federal rules that UI is. And so there's not a good justification for aligning in all cases. So it's not just in this definition that there will be places where employers of all types are going to have to like suss out the differences between eligibility and kind of definitions under UI and those under paid family leave. And I wouldn't support making changes to align ourselves more with UI where it's a federal regulation that's intentionally or unintentionally restrictive to like Oregon employers and Oregon employees. So I think there are places where that makes sense and places where it doesn't, and that's throughout the law.
Thanks, Andrea.
I was also going to say that as a value statement, and like to ensure that all people have access to the time that they need for medical and family. This is intentionally crafted to be inclusive and not exclusive, and recognizing that too many people have been left out for too long. So I think it's important to not follow what we have in other areas that exclude people or as Andrea said, unintentionally or intentionally.
Thanks, Eva.
Yeah, I'll just add that there's legislative intent all over the record about this program covering all workers. There is a mechanism for self-employed workers to be covered. To model after UI would directly conflict with those efforts.
Thanks, Jessica. So more to come on this. We will again welcome your thoughts in writing as well. So if you can do that this week, that would be wonderful. I'm going to move on to the statement of need for the definition related to contribution wages, the rule that we just talked about. Just a reminder, remember the purpose of the statement of need and fiscal impact is for the agency to explain the fiscal and small business impact for those administrative rules. Remember, this isn't impacts that were caused by the statute, and the administrative rules were just written for clarification purposes. These are for impacts that the administrative rules actually cause. You'll see this information when the administrative rules are posted in the Secretary of State Bulletin. You can find the draft statement of needs on our paid family medical leave website, as well as Dean will be pulling them up here. I'll bring up a couple points received at the last Thursday's RAC meeting, but also welcome additional verbal comments today, and again, written comments by hopefully tomorrow by the end of the day. So Dean has on the screen the statement of need and fiscal impact. And he just scrolled down to the top of page 2, which is the racial equity impact section. Just again, a reminder, House Bill 2293 was enacted by the 2021 legislature. The bill requires state agencies to include a racial equity impact analysis in its statement of need for all rulemaking. This requirement takes effect January 1st, 2022, but the Employment Department has chosen to implement this aspect of rulemaking earlier with the adoption of the paid family medical leave administrative rules right now. Therefore, you'll notice that we added a section to the statement of need and fiscal impact pertaining to racial equity impacts, keeping in mind that many of the impacts from implementation of the paid family medical leave program are a direct result of the legislation itself, rather than from individual rules. In order to evaluate the racial equity impacts, we have chosen to address these two questions. The first one is, what are the racial impacts of this particular rule or rules and the policy or decision, and who will benefit from or be burdened? And the second question is, are there strategies to mitigate the unintended consequences? So again, feedback received at Thursday's RAC meeting was the racial impact section didn't include the impact to employees. And I'm going to continue to work on this, but would welcome any discussion today or in writing how you think the administrative rule for the definition of wages impacts employees and not the statute. With the statute tying wages to the UI definition located in ORS 657-105, specifically section 2, ORS 657-105 requires that non-cash remuneration paid for services performed in agricultural labor or domestic service shall not be considered remuneration or wages for any purpose. So I'm just sitting here struggling, trying, as I believe the impact for the racial impact is caused by the statute and not the administrative rule that was drafted, but I welcome further thoughts on this. And again, we can I don't need the thoughts today as well. I could have them in writing later, but just trying to really think about, is it the statute that is causing the racial inequity for this one rule, or is it the administrative rule that is causing that? And then just scrolling down on the statement of need, on the top of page 3 is the cost of compliance section. This is where we talk about the impact of state agencies and small businesses. And we feel the impact on state agencies, local governments, and other public bodies is also created by the statute requiring them to withhold from the employees' wages the paid family medical leave contributions and not the administrative rule itself. However, feedback received at the last meeting is that the record keeping for employers and employees will have to be different if we use a different definition for UI for agricultural labor. So based on the discussion that we just had and additional changes, I'll be keeping that in mind when I continue to draft the administrative rule and work on the statement of need to see if there's a change needed in this section or not, depending on what we end up with the administrative rule there. So just pointing that out. Are there any other thoughts on the statement of need and fiscal impact that I didn't cover today, or things that you thought of between the meeting last Thursday and today? Otherwise, you can also send your input to the OED rules email box as well.
Shannon, back to the racial equity statement. Is the question specific to discussing agriculture wages that you're asking if it's more a statutory issue or a rules issue?
Correct. Yeah.
And it's both, right? Like, I think there's definitely some prohibitions that are limiting you in the way that you're allowed to define this under statute that may be discriminatory. Yeah. But I also think the way that we interpret the places where we don't have those restrictions are really going to be important to ensuring that people working in an agricultural industry are able to earn an equitable benefit through our paid family leave program. And so it would be good to see some reflection about kind of where we see there being potential impacts based on how we define what we're counting as wages in terms of how it will impact receiving an equitable benefit on the other side. And I could see the argument that like there might be ways that we count that would be problematic in the other direction. So it would be useful, I think, to reflect a little bit more on what the impact of the decisions that we can make in rules might be on how folks who are disproportionately Latinx and people of color working in agriculture would be impacted by the way we define wages.
Thanks, Andrea. That's helpful. Other thoughts, comments? All right, then moving away from the statement of need and fiscal impact, we'll go back to the PowerPoint presentation. This section, I'm going to go over some of the equivalent plan rules that we received feedback on last Thursday's RAC meeting and wanting further discussion today. That doesn't mean I'm going to provide, that you can't provide additional feedback or discuss any of the rules I didn't bring up today. I have those all prepared and ready to talk about if needed. We have them available was I gonna say? Before we start going on through the rules though, again, I'm just gonna do a quick summary of what is required in statute for equivalent plans. So ORS 657B 210 to ORS 657B 260 establishes that an employer may apply to the department to offer an equivalent plan for the paid family and medical leave benefits for its employees instead of participating in the paid family and medical leave state plan. The equivalent plan must be made available to all employees who have been employed by the employer for 30 days. The plan must be equal to or greater than the plan offered by the state. When applying for an equivalent plan with the department can charge an application fee up to $250 to assist with the cost of processing. The employer of an equivalent plan can choose to have the employee pay part of the contributions, but the employee can't pay more than 60%. The employee contributions received by the employer must be used for plan expenses and be in a separate fund and can't be used for any other purposes. Just to reiterate some of the feedback we received, that some of the feedback that we received, we're struggling, does it fit to go in administrative rule or is it better in guides or instructions? It's the same struggle that we had in batch 1 rules as well of, what do you put in rule? What do you put in forms and instructions or guidebooks? And so we're just recognizing that we're struggling with that right at the moment. Because a lot of this information you will see in the instructions and guidebooks as well. So on the screen, Dean has the compilation of the draft rules, which can also be found on our website. And specifically, he's gone down to the equivalent plan section. And this is the 2210 application requirements and effective date. So just a reminder, this rule discusses the application requirements for an equivalent plan and explains when the department will charge the $250 fee. And then when the department will charge a $150 fee for the equivalent plan application. At the RAC meeting on Thursday, there was mention of more clarity on what it means to change the plan or changing the structure of the plan in order for it to become a substantive change. So up on the screen, we have a summary of the equivalent plan fees that is explained in rule, but in table format that hopefully lays out a little clearer. The first year, the application fee will be $250, but each year after that, for the next 3 years, the fee will be $150 unless there is a substantive change, like switching insurance policies or changing from a fully insured to an employer administered or vice versa. There is no fee if there is non-substantive changes in between annual reapprovals or after the 3-year reapproval process is complete. On this slide, we provided some examples of what we consider non-substantive changes. So for example, changing the business or contact information, changing a policy number and effective dates for a fully insured equivalent plan. These Department of Consumer Business Services mentioned that the overall structure or contents of a fully insured policy can't change without going through the Department of Consumer Business Services approval or review process. So employers with a fully insured equivalent plan won't be able to piecemeal or choose what they do or don't want to enforce out of the policy. You notice on this list, they're all minor changes. It doesn't change the actual equivalent plan. The business can make non-substantive changes anytime without a fee or only have to pay the $150 at the yearly reapproval process instead of the $250. Looking at the administrative rule, do you think there's more language that we need to add? The rule currently says changing business or contact information or changing the policy number or effective dates. And just looking at that list, oops, sorry, Dean, going back to the slide, just looking at that list, it to me, a lot of that fit under the changing business or contact information or changing the policy number or effective date. But I want to recognize if we're missing stuff on that need to be added to the administrative rule and welcome any feedbacks on that. Again, it doesn't have to be today, just something to think about when providing the written feedback.
I think it would be, this is Paloma.
Yeah.
I think it would be helpful if there were more of these examples listed. Just so people understand what it means to be. I mean, I think you could sort of combine these into smaller things that are still examples. So like general contact information, small typos. I mean, I think you could sort of combine them, but have them still listed in what is considered a non-substantive.
Yeah, and I think this is back to the part, Paloma, where we're kind of struggling with, is this, because this list is kind of what we have drafted already in our instruction or guidebook. And so is it more appropriate there? Because it's not going outside of what's already written in rule, or should we put it in administrative rule? And this is where we keep going back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, having this very detailed list in the guidebook, it makes more sense, but having sort of providing some examples in the rules, like typos, name changes, contact information changes, but like not this detailed.
Okay.
I'm less worried about what is considered a non-substantive change and what is considered a substantive change.
Okay, thanks.
Shannon, would we be able to, I know you just said that the non-substantive changes are in the guidebook that's being developed. So are we putting substantive changes in there as well?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the reason why I want us to be more specific here is because this is going to be the first document that people are going to be able to see as sort of as they're processing the decision about whether or not they're going to go forward with an equivalent plan or with the state plan. This will likely be available to the public, to employers, to workers, before all the guidebooks would be. So we need to be specific here so people are put on notice.
Thanks, Paloma. Thanks for the further explanation. Other thoughts, questions, comments? All right, then going back to the compilation of the batch 2 rules, and we're scrolling down to the rule ending with 2220, plan requirements. On this rule, at last Thursday's RAC meeting, there was a concern that the rule wasn't clear about when a claim was considered to be complete in section 13 of the rule. So Dean, if you can scroll down just a little bit more. This is important because it decides when the employer must provide the benefit payment to the employee within 2 weeks. This aligns with the requirement for the state plan. We're working with the benefit team to explain further what constitute a completed claim, but welcome any examples or suggestions you have. Again, the examples or suggestions can be given today at this meeting or in writing by the end of day tomorrow. So we are just recognizing, yeah, that was a good point. And we do want to think about that further, how to work on that. The next one that I have is 2230, which is reporting requirements. Quarterly, the equivalent plan employer must file the Oregon quarterly combined tax report detailing the paid family medical leave wages. They don't need to pay the employer and employee paid family medical leave contributions to the department, but the department still needs to know the wage amount for each employee and the head count. The current Oregon quarterly combined tax report is being updated to include a column for paid family and medical leave wages and information in addition to what's already on the report for the UI wages, state income tax withholding, and workers benefit fund, just to name a few that are already captured on that form. Feedback received last Thursday at the RAC meeting was the insurer or third-party administrator may not have the paid family and medical leave wage information for all employees. They'll only have it for the ones who have filed a claim. And just for me, I envision this, the quarterly form to be filled out by the same individual the employer currently uses for the payroll form and not the insurer or third-party administrator, as this is more of a payroll related process here. Whereas the information that we need annually from the equivalent plan employer within 30 days of the anniversary date of the effective date of the equivalent plan needs to report the department aggregate information on benefit claims and plan expenses from the prior year. This information then could be, I would see, could be reported by the employer, the insurer, or a third-party administrator. And again, questions presented at last week's RAC meeting is why does the department want to know the administrative costs of the equivalent plan for the employer? And just to answer that, we feel the administrative costs are needed to help the department with audits and whether the employer is using the amounts collected for the right purpose and ensure they are not over collecting from workers. in the event the plan is terminated, for the state to determine how much the employer might need to deposit into the paid family and medical leave trust fund, which we may need to be clear in both the termination and withdrawal rule by looking at those further. Another concern raised in this draft rule doesn't have reporting requirements for individuals taking leave or for newly hired employees. How will the division ensure plans are accessible for all and monitor if individuals are taking leave? And our thought here is the employer will be reporting the number of claims received, paid, and denied during the year, but the department will also be listening to employees if they contact us or if they're working with BOLI, if wage claims are being received from BOLI. The department won't be using just one tool. There are a number of tools we'll be using to monitor equivalent plans. And I'm just wondering if there's additional data points you think would be helpful for the department to receive that aren't included in the draft rules. And again, welcome all of your feedback now or in writing. But that's just some of the thoughts that we are thinking about the feedback received on this administrative rule. Thoughts? All right. Then moving on to the next one, 2240, record keeping and department review. So just in summary, if you choose a fully insured equivalent plan, the insurance requirements are that records are kept for 6 years. We have chosen a rule to require all equivalent plan employers to keep records for 6 years. The records are provided to the department upon request. And based on feedback from the RAC meeting last Thursday, we will add additional language in the draft rule to be clear that the records can be kept electronically or in a paper format. Another comment received during the RAC meeting is to make it clear in the administrative rule that the information provided by the employer won't be disclosed. ORS 657B 400 states that all information is exempt from disclosure and is only for exclusive use and information of the director of the employment department in administering this chapter. We've been trying again not to repeat the statute within the administrative rule, so that is why we didn't include it within the draft administrative rule. And this is just another thing we're wrestling with of when to repeat something in statute or when not to, and put in our instructions instead. So again, we welcome comments there.
Shannon,
yeah.
I'm getting a message from one of our staff that is behind the scenes. That did you mention Andrea's concern about new employees and I missed it?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I believe on the previous rule.
Okay.
Yeah. But I'm welcome to talk about it if anything, if I missed something or there's further concern. Okay. And then also with this administrative rule, after looking further at 1D, I need your assistance as I read this to state that the employer must keep track of which employees take leave and the total benefits paid and denied for each employee that took leave. And the feedback that we received is this was vague, and I'm struggling to see like where we can add additional language there to help it not be so vague. And so I welcome any suggestions or feedback you have there as well. So there's a couple things I'm wrestling with this rule that we would like your feedback or thoughts on. And again, welcome.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. Just to reiterate, the feedback and regarding this batch 2 needs to be in the OED_rules email address inbox by close of business tomorrow.
Correct.
Okay, go ahead, Shannon.
Okay, scrolling down to the middle of page 7, which the last four of the administrative rule for that is 2280, which is the solvency documentation, deposit bond or letter of credit. If an employer has an employer administered equivalent plan, remember this is only for employer administered plans and not for fully insured plans. The employer must provide to the department a deposit bond or irrevocable letter of credit issued by an insured institution to make sure the employer has enough funds to pay for an equivalent plan. Feedback received last Thursday is this may be a little excessive for an employer and maybe the employer could provide something else. And I'm always welcome to different examples of what the employer administrative equivalent plan could provide. We'd love to consider all of those examples. So again, just welcome any feedback on that. The next rule is also in the middle of page 7, which is 2400, disputes between an equivalent plan employer and employee request for hearings. The statute, specifically ORS 657B 420, requires the department to provide a dispute resolution process to assist in resolving disputes between employers and employees. And again, feedback received at the last RAC meeting on this administrative rule was the notice should go to the employer and the insurer if the insurance company is involved. And I'm just struggling to understand if the feedback was suggesting every place in the draft rule where we say employer, we should also say or insurer. It was that the comment that, or did I misunderstand what was said last Thursday?
I just wanted to make sure that there's clearly that everyone is put on notice if an employee has felt like there's been a denial that was improper. Generally, I think the employee would go to the insurer first. But if the requirement is tied to the employer, then I would like it to be both employer and insurer if there is an insurer involved.
Okay. Thanks, Paloma. That's helpful. Top of page 8 is the Administrative Rule 2450, which is termination by the department. The department can terminate an employer's equivalent plan for misuse of the employee contributions they're collecting, for failure to follow the approved equivalent plan, for failure to follow the equal to or greater than state requirements, or and for if the department thinks the employer is at risk of not being able to pay the benefits. There was suggestion about tightening up the risk language in 1D. We also thought about changing 1D to remove everything that it states right now and just keep that line that said, and just have it say employer insolvency. And that would eliminate the concerns of what does increased risk mean. But again, we welcome any suggestions we have on, or you have for the 1D specifically in this rule. And if an employee is receiving benefits from an equivalent plan, the employer should continue to pay the benefit payments for the remainder of the employee's leave. If the employee doesn't pay them, the state will pay the benefits, but will seek reimbursement from the employer for the benefits the state paid on their behalf. At the last meeting, you guys pointed out we need language in section 9 of this rule that the employer must remit to the department any contributions withheld from the employee's wages remaining in the possession of the employer, but minus the amount that they're going to continue paying out for benefits in section 8. We recognize that we forgot that, and we are going to add similar language that is in withdrawal rule into this draft rule as well. And so we thank you for pointing that out to us. As I mentioned previously, we also may add a language to the rule about the employer letting us know the contributions collected and the amount of the administration fees and benefits paid from the last annual update, so the department knows how much we should be receiving. So there might be additional language being added there. Again, welcome any thoughts or concerns or feedback on that. That's all the feedback I have prepared for the 11 rules based on what the feedback you guys received on Thursday. But again, welcome any additional discussion you have on these 11 draft rules before we take a break. Any additional thoughts that you thought about between Thursday and now, like, oh, I wish I would have talked to them about this or anything like that. All right, then I think this is a natural breaking point. We'll take a 10-minute break and then we will come back and see if you guys have, the RAC members have anything else to add. We'll go on this, talk quickly about the statement of need for the equivalent plans, and then we'll move on to the public comment period. So
Shannon, let's do 10:10.
Okay, we'll see you all at 10:10. Get out and stretch your legs a little bit. So get off the screen.
Okay, it is 10:10, so we are going to restart this meeting, or not restart, but continue. I don't think any of us want to restart the meeting and be here even longer. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Shannon, but I want to just remind everybody that the purpose of this second RAC meeting is to have more in-depth discussion from the RAC members on the PFMLI plan for these rules and the language for these rules. So with that, Shannon.
I'm gonna make sure I'm off mute. Am I off mute? Okay, good.
You are.
Each Teams and Zoom is different, so. All right, we're just gonna go over the statement of need for the equivalent plan, and I'm not just gonna go over it overall because we went over it last time, but I'm just gonna pull up, have Dean has on the slide the document of the statement of need and fiscal impact, which again can also be found on our website. This statement of need and fiscal impact covers the 10 rules that are for the equivalent plans, some of them which we discussed today. And just I want to point out one of the feedback we received on Thursday's RAC meeting is in the racial equity impact section. Again, keeping in mind that the section is a direct result of the rules that provide the impact and not the legislation itself. Concerns raised on the racial equity impact section at last Thursday's RAC meeting was BIPOC employees weren't included in the racial equity impact section, and some word choices used in the section we may want to think about changing. And I really thank you guys for your comments on there. I'm continuing to make changes and updates to include BIPOC employees and wording used that we used in the existing one, again, to make that more inclusive. And I continue to welcome any suggestions by writing by the end of the day tomorrow to make these changes to the document. But again, I'm working on that right now. So that's what I'm working on. Other feedback or thoughts that you had on the statement of need and fiscal impact for the equivalent plan rules that you weren't able to provide at last Thursday's RAC meeting, that you thought of in the meantime, that you want to have a conversation on today, or anything else, just let me know. Otherwise, we will move on the agenda. All right. I am going to turn it over to Anne for the public comment period then.
You were talking about unmuting and then I did it. So thanks for that lead in there. I appreciate that, Shannon. So let's do the public comments. We have 17 different questions in the queue. I'm going to start at the top. When I call your name, and I do see that like Darius has several in here, and so when I call your name, if you could raise your hand so that Dean can find you, and then he will allow you to speak and you'll unmute. I'm going to read everybody's questions this time just so that we have it on the recording, not just in the question and answers section. So those that view the recording later have the questions in the audio version as well. So let's start with Jennifer. Is it Gwen? And Jennifer put in the Q&A, why are these rules with UI that doesn't make sense for the paid family leave that is much more closely related to OFLA and FEMLA than UI? Remember that the public will already have a lot of trouble understanding the difference between protected leave laws and paid leave laws. Also, UI is not paid leave, so it doesn't make sense as a model. Then Jennifer put in the Q&A, how would the fee structure for the plan changes be impacted by non-legislative changes that are required by state, local, and federal rules, i.e. IRS rules? And Jennifer, I'm not sure if you had another one in, oh, you do. Quarterly reporting for the purpose of PFMLI is excessive. The only other reports we provide that often are payroll reports, but this reporting requirement is much more burdensome, excuse me. And I believe that is all Jennifer submitted into the question and answer section. So Jennifer, if you want to unmute and then provide any additional comments or questions, that would be great.
Jennifer, are you able to unmute? At the bottom of the screen. Each, like I said, Zoom and Teams are completely different. So trying to understand which one, where it's located. So while Jennifer's unmuting, I'm going to just go over a little bit, a couple of her questions. So the first one was, why are these rules with UI? Specifically, 657B ties to the wage definition in UI. And so that's why we are looking at the agricultural labor definition along with UI. Agree, recognizes that UI is not a paid leave, but the statute does tie us to some of the definitions in UI right now. And so that's why we're looking at those. Are you able to get off mute, Jennifer? All right, the second question then that she had, and how would the fee structure for plan changes be impacted by non-legislative changes that are required by state, local, or federal rules? Right now we have it in rule about legislative changes, but you do bring up a good point about looking about, you know, if it's IRS change, not just the state change, how does that impact it? So we will consider that. So thank you for your feedback there. And then the last one, can't remember, was, oh, the quarterly reporting for paid family medical leave is excessive. The quarterly reporting does align with the payroll reporting. It is, the quarterly reporting is reporting the paid family medical leave wages and the amount the employee paid and the employer paid. But in this instance, where the equivalent plan will not be paying to the state program, then they will just be reporting the PFMLI wages. And that is on the quarterly report that goes along with all the other wage information that is reported to the state, like state withholding, workers benefit fund, UI, I can't remember other ones that are on that report as well. So that does align with the quarterly reporting.
Okay, so
Jennifer, are you able to get off mute?
So we've clicked the button a couple of times to ask Jennifer to unmute. I'm not really sure what is going on. When Dean or I ask attendees to unmute, you should get a little blue pop-up that allows you to unmute. The other way that you can unmute is on the bottom left of your screen where the mute button is. You should be able to unmute that way. So since we seem to be having some sort of technical snafu, and maybe it's because it's Tuesday, I don't know. We're going to move along. And then Jennifer, if we're able to figure that out at the end, when we get finished with everybody else, if you have other comments or would like to submit something, please raise your hand again and we will, or submit your name into the Q&A and we will try again. Sorry about that. So let's go to the next person is Darius Freeman. Darius has on the Q&A, there are, again, several of them. So I will start with the top one and read them all through. And then Shannon, if you need me to reread, I can do that as well. Based on corporate structure, an employer could have multiple BINs for their overall entity. Recommend clarifying if one application can be filed for all applicable BINs when they're all coming under a single equivalent plan. That's the first one. The second one, for equivalent plans, recommend annual reporting be on a calendar year basis rather than based on the equivalent plan year. Carriers and TPAs already have reporting capabilities for claims, but they are typically on a calendar year basis in alignment with tax reporting. And since carriers/TPAs would be administering equivalent plans for multiple employers, reporting on each plan's year could be extremely burdensome as opposed to standard year-end reporting. And then another one is recommend insurance carriers TPA be included as well as employer in 470-070-2400. And then the last one for Darius is regarding 471-070-2450. It will be difficult to calculate how much will be needed to pay remaining claim benefits at time of termination, since employees could request extensions to claims or report further intermittent hours. Recommend remittance happens once all benefits are paid.
Can you hear me? Did I unmute correctly?
Yes, you did. That was perfect.
Fantastic. And I don't know how much more I need to say other than the comments, but I will say on that first one, corporate structure, we've seen this a lot in the other states, Massachusetts and Washington, where employers set up separate employer ID numbers for subsidiaries, divisions, whatever the case may be, but their entire organization is going to fall under a single equivalent plan. So, you know, you may not want to review 20 applications for the same equivalent plan, right? So I would just say you might want to think about how administratively that would work for you, because that it's not uncommon that employers are structured that way.
Thanks. For
yeah. And then the annual reporting, I think Gina Rutledge actually made a similar comment. And so you might see a theme there, but just year-end reporting is very typical. Employers are equipped to do it. TPAs are equipped to do it. Carriers are equipped to do it, you know, versus trying to do off-cycle reporting based on the equivalent plan year. So just something to think about there.
Thank you for bringing that up also.
Yeah, the 2400 reference where carriers and TPA should be included as well as employers, that's in that dispute section. I think somebody brought that up as I was typing it. I think Paloma might have mentioned that as well, right? Because the dispute, especially on a fully insured plan, would actually be with the carrier. And then, yeah, whether it's termination or withdrawal, any of those sections where we're talking about, you know, employee contributions that are still held by the employer needing to be remitted to the state, it's going to be difficult to calculate what's still owed from a benefits perspective until those claims play out, because employees could be extended on claim. They could, like I said, more intermittent hours come in, depending on how you define how long the original plan owns a claim, because intermittent can go on a really long time. That's another question for another day under benefits. But just something to think about is how to make that calculation so that the employer or the plans, you know, they have the funds to pay the benefits, but yet still remit what's left over when it's, you know, when it's done.
All great feedback, Darius says thank you. Andrew, Jen, do you have anything you want to add in addition to that?
Sorry, I'm also struggling with the mute buttons. I don't necessarily have anything to add other than that I do appreciate the feedback, and it is, we will continue to consider those points. So thank you.
I wanted to maybe share some concern about the dispute process, and just generally about the fact that, like, there's more to certifying a plan than certifying that the insurance meets the benefit requirements of the statute. Like, there's also a set of employer requirements around non-discrimination, retaliation, right, that folks are agreeing to if offering an equivalent plan as well. And so there's a process question there about, like, how they're certifying to that continually, you know, as part
Agreed.
of the process. And then around the dispute piece, it's in that case, there could be a dispute between the employee and the employer, depending on what part of the thing has been violated. There could be a dispute between the insurance and the employee. And I just want to make sure in that process, however we design it, that the employee doesn't get stuck in the position of like everyone kind of pointing at each other that it's someone else's fault and not being able to like have their thing be resolved, which feels like it could be a real issue in this particular scope of plans. So I would like a bit more. I like the dispute section kind of identifying the employee and the employer as having a role, but if we're going to bring in insurers also having a role in that dispute process, I wouldn't want to see the employer not involved in some way, or monitoring that, or, anyway, so as you're kind of thinking about that, it just feels like there could be multiple kinds of disputes. The dispute could be with the insurer or with the employer, and the employer is choosing the insurer. So in that way, the employer is still involved. And I just wonder how we have a dispute process that can rectify those things simply for the employee.
Great thoughts, Andrea. Questions? Yeah.
Paloma.
Yeah, so I just want to, because I feel like we've gone round and round on this particular piece on equivalent plans, the anti-discrimination and anti-retaliation provisions are a provision related to the entirety of the law. It's not specific to the plan. So an employee can't be discriminated against or retaliated against for inquiring about any sort of benefit, regardless of whether or not they're in the state plan or an equivalent plan. It's not, I mean, you could have a statement that says, no, I will not discriminate, but it sort of is a moot point because the law trumps whatever statement or whatever is in the equivalent plan. That is an overarching provision in the law. So spending a lot of time thinking about that with regards to equivalent plans, I think is wasted effort, because the employee has a right to go directly to circumvent any sort of equivalent plan discussion anyways and go straight to BOLI if they feel like they've been discriminated against. So I don't want us to get bogged down on that kind of thing when we're talking about equivalent plans, because that is just a requirement of the law.
Thanks for pointing that out, Paloma.
Darius, did you have anything else for us?
No, I do agree absolutely, with Andrea, that there is an employer role to play for sure. And having done these plans in a lot of states, it does work, but you do have to figure out, how to make sure the employee is properly informed and the employer stay properly informed. So to your point, nobody gets caught in the middle or lost in the shuffle or feels that they're without, solution. So definitely a way to do that.
All right, thank you. Okay, we are going to move on to the next person. And I'm told that Gina Rutledge has left the meeting, but I'm going to go ahead and read the questions that were put in to the Q&A section. And then Shannon, you can talk to those points. So that way, again, if the video is viewed later, then Gina will have the answers to the things that were put into the Q&A. So for starters, 471-070-2210 application requirements recommend looking at successes in Massachusetts and Connecticut regarding the period between contribution collections and benefits payable to offer tax exemption waivers when an employer proves. Okay. I thought maybe it was provide. So they have or will have compliant coverage. And then Gina provides the link to the recently published Connecticut PFML policy and procedures guides, which shows the interim process and how it is transitioning to benefits paid and contributions due periods. Then Gina goes on to say, recommend that the definition of completed claim should include complete information from the employee as well as certifications, such as healthcare provider certification for a serious health condition or proof of birth, adoption, foster care placement, to name a few. Lessons learned from Washington is that employees do not always fill in every line of the claim form, and follow up can take time and delay the claim decision. employer information is great, but if it is not received within the time frame set by these regulations, should not hold up approval if the state has the full information from the employee and the certification proof. And I think there's two more. Yep, there's two more. There they are. 471-070-2230, subsection 3. The employer must report aggregate information annually within 30 days of each anniversary of the effective date of the equivalent plan. This can be confusing and adds a lot of burden to the employer. May we recommend that you rely on the aggregate annual report listed in subsection 2, because if an employer changes carriers or TPAs mid-year, the claims will be reported in the annual report due that next January. This also will help keep track of annual benefit and/or contribution changes that normally take place in January of each new year. And then the last one that Gina put on here is 470-070-2400. The dispute between an equivalent plan employer and employee. It looks like 3C may recommend adding clarification that in this second round of appeals, that the 20-day deadline is in response to the employee receiving the first round appeal dispute resolution response and not from the original claim denial. And that was all that Gina put in there.
That was a lot. So the first one on the application requirements for 2210, we thank you for the additional information to go and look at. And so we'll go look at that from Connecticut's paid family leave policy and procedure guides. The second one
was employer must report aggregate information.
The 30 days of their anniversary of the effective date. I think this is back to the same comment that we just received about having them do it annually instead of on their anniversary date. So we'll take that into consideration. So thank you. And then the dispute between an equivalent plan employer and employee. Again, thank you for the clarification of clarifying the deadline is response to the first round dispute resolution response and not the original filed claim denial. So we'll look at that as well when looking over that rule. And I believe that is it.
Yes, that is it. Okay, the next person is Sharon Bolin. Sharon put into the Q&A, if an employee who is a member of a union required to pay into the PFML, and then Sharon also put in who has to pay into PFML. Is this based on residence or work location?
Hi, Sharon.
Hi.
So the first one, if an employee is a member of a union required to pay into the paid family medical leave, yes, all individuals are required to pay in again, but this depends on bargaining of how much the employee pays. The employee can't pay more than 60% of the contribution rate. The only individuals that are not in the paid family medical leave program that need to elect in are tribal government and tribal and federal government employees. So those are the two that it doesn't automatically pertain to.
Okay.
And then the question on who has to pay, is it based on residency or work location? It's based on work location. So if you are working in Oregon, then you will be paying into the program. And if you're like an Oregon resident and I work all of my time in Idaho, then my wages in Idaho would not be paying into the program.
Okay, so what happens if you have employees who are residents of Washington and work in Oregon and work in Washington?
Yeah, so if they work in Oregon and in Washington, the Oregon amount will be paid on the wages in Oregon, earned in Oregon.
Okay,
And what about self-employed, Shannon?
Self-employed individuals elect in to and can participate in the program as well. But they are not automatically included. They have to make an election.
Thank you. Sharon, do you have anything else to ask or add?
no, that was just my main question. We have a lot of people that are either Washington residents, Oregon residents, and they go back and forth. I've got Oregon residents who are working in California. And everybody seems to be coming up with these new things that everybody's going to pay into. So I'm just trying to make sure that I'm paying into the correct one instead of the wrong one. So maybe if you guys could address that in the actual rules, that would be very helpful.
Thank you for that feedback. Thanks.
Okay. For the next person, we have Thomas. And Thomas, I'm sorry, I see that Dean already found you, and I prefer to not mess up names. So I'm just going to read your question that you have here, and then you can add to that if you need to. So since insurance carriers will provide plans to many employers, is it possible that insurance carriers report information on claims once per year for all of the plans that they cover instead of within 30 days of each anniversary date?
Yes, that's correct. It's pronounced Pacino, and thank you for not destroying it. Yeah, so we're a carrier on the East Coast and support 250,000 or more covered employees amongst New Jersey, New York, now Massachusetts, and it. We provide a lot of service and move a lot of claims. However, you can find that we will have employers that come on and off our program at various times of the year. And so like New York State does, they ask us to provide, annually on the premium we've collected, on the claims we've paid, and ask for various statistics on those. And it's, although a lot of work, we would rather not have to do that, monthly or even shorter time period if we have to do it within 30 days of each anniversary.
Yeah, Thomas, thanks for that. As of right now, it is set up that each individual employer would have to report, and it wouldn't be looking at a report for all the people the insurance carrier is insuring. And so, it's just something will take in and consider. So thank you for your feedback on that.
Sure, thank you.
Thomas, do you have anything else to add?
I do not.
All right. Well, thank you for attending and giving us your feedback. We appreciate it.
Sure.
And next is Elaine. And Elaine, again, like with Thomas, I'm not going to try and pronounce your last name, but I will read your couple of comments that you've put into the question and answer section. Can you consider, when putting out rules and FAQs, how the reporting works for employers who switch from state to equivalent plans mid-year? That's the first one, Shannon, or vice versa. And then the last question that Elaine has is maybe add information on primary work location, state something related to work hours, percentage of time, etc., to determine primary work location.
Hi, Elaine. We will definitely be putting out some FAQs about, switching from a state plan to equivalent plan or vice versa, and what that looks like. And we'll continue to look at, do we need to add something in the administrative rules? Because that will probably be a common thing that happens. And so we want to make sure and have that information out there and available for individuals. As far as the question, what was the second one? It went away.
It went away.
It went somewhere.
Hold on, I'm finding it. I'm sure Elaine could probably tell us.
Yeah. Oh, add information on the primary work location related to hours, work percentage of time, determine the primary work location. We
Yes.
are working on that. In the statute, there's a section of the statute that calls place of performance. So we are still working on administrative rule for that of what is determined where an employee is working. So stay tuned. There will be more information coming on that. We're just still working on it and gathering information of what that would look like.
Elaine, do you have more to add?
Looks like she's off mute.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what's happening with our Zoom today.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Elaine, if you would like to add more, if you could put your name back into the Q&A, then we will circle back to you if we can figure out what's going on with our technology here. And in the meantime, we're going to move to D. Haggerty. D put in, I apologize if I missed this. Will the reporting be included in the UI quarterly reporting similar to how other states are doing it, or will it be a separate quarterly report? If a separate quarterly report, when will the filing specifications be available to software vendors and employers? And that is the only one that D has.
D, are you able to get off of mute?
I think, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. There's other states that are actually doing the leave or paid family leave reporting in their UI, quarterly UI reporting. So my question is basically, is Oregon going to be doing the same, or are you going to have a separate quarterly report that needs to be sent, or has that decision?
Yeah, great question. It will be on the UI quarterly report. That is, you're calling it the UI quarterly report, but it's a combined payroll report right now, which has UI, state withholding, workers benefit fund. We're also updating the form right now to add a paid family medical leave section. So it'll all be on one report and you won't have to file multiple reports. So that is great news.
Yeah, that is good news.
And
and do you know when those specifications will be available?
Yeah, as far as the specifications, I don't have a date on that, but I know they're working on it right now. So I don't have a date, unfortunately.
Well, as a software vendor, we need a lot of lead time to get the changes made, and out to our clients, make it through QA, give it to our clients for them to make it through QA. So the longer lead time we have, the better.
Yeah. Thank you for the feedback on that. I would anticipate, I don't know when you get them, but I anticipate that it will be sooner than the normal time period.
Much. That's all I had.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dee. Elaine did put in the bottom of the Q&A that it says, I'm good now, just wanted those items considered in rules because I know they have come up in other states' rollouts. So Elaine was able to unmute and then we couldn't hear Elaine. So I'm passing that message along. Thank you, Elaine. We appreciate that.
Trying again. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Let's try
I don't know
it
what
again.
No, thank you. That was it. I just and I'm glad you brought up about getting the specifications early too, because I've been involved in the Washington, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and part of New York rollouts, and I know that that becomes a big issue. When they have the private plan and then they have the state plan and then there's the mid-year conversions, as we call them. So whatever you can come up with and put into writing about that, the clearer the better. And I'm glad that we're going to be getting the reporting specifications early, because that will help third-party administrators program their systems to ensure they're capturing what they need from the clients so that we can get you the correct reporting requirements. So that's it. Thank you.
I'm glad you're able to get off mute.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
And it's Cantrowitz.
Oh,
Yeah,
thanks.
I'm really glad I didn't try and pronounce that because that would not have been what came out of my mouth. So thank
Yes,
you
my-
for letting us know how to pronounce
No
it.
problem. It's my married name, so I understand.
All right.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, next person on the list is Cynthia Nail. Washington has a PF and ML plan in effect. Are you looking at their guidelines to help build the Oregon plan?
Greetings, everyone. I was just, they're kind of similar, and it would be easier for an employer if the plans weren't substantially different in implementing them.
Yeah, Cynthia, we're looking at multiple states, not just Washington, but we're looking at California, Massachusetts, all sorts of different plans. And so we are taking all of that into consideration, as well as looking at our statute and how it's similar or different from the other states, because if they're all not the same.
Thank you, ladies.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next on our list is Julie Bond, if I said that right. And Julie typed into the chat box, would it be similar as UI? Would it be similar as UI now? A claimant employee chooses what state they want to claim benefits and could transfer wages from Washington for benefits and vice versa. Or since this is not a federal program, but a state program, would they have to figure it out themselves? What state to claim benefits?
Does that make sense? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
It's more of a follow-up from the previous question and answer of, like if certain states have a program currently, would they be able to combine what's been provided from multiple employers for that claim period, to use, or would they have to figure out what state they have the most, would be able to get the best benefit from, if that makes sense?
Technically, it needs to be, for Oregon purposes, it needs to be on the wages that you earned in Oregon. But as far as claiming the benefits, we're still figuring that out, how that would work with multiple states. And so there'll be more to come on that when we work on the benefits rules, which are coming up in the next round.
Oh, okay. So possibly they could just claim benefits in multiple states if they have multiple been reported in multiple states. Is that then what I'm understanding, or needs to get clarified?
We're still trying to clarify it, and so I don't want to speak on that yet, or say one way or the other. We're still working on how that would work.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Julie. Next, we have Joanne, is it Lehman? All our employees work from home. We have one employee that lives and works from home in Washington. We are an Oregon employer. We're receiving ongoing information about Washington CARES Act. Will this employee be considered for both the PFMLI and CARES Act? And then for clarification, we are a public charter school that is virtual.
Hi, Joanne, can you hear us?
There we go.
Yes, I hope that makes sense. I mean, we are juggling so many different rules and laws between the two states. And, when you hear people, they say, well, they live in Washington, but they travel to Oregon to work. She lives and works in Washington and hasn't traveled at all due to COVID, and actually moved to Washington during COVID. So it always seems to be a discussion between us administrators of what we're going to do. And we try to stay on top of all these things. And this is just another piece coming to us that gets a little bit tricky when it comes to trying to decipher what she's considered.
Yeah. So yeah, this is two different laws, the Washington CARES Act and the Paid Family Medical Leave for Oregon. The teleworking thing has come out more since COVID, and so there are more people teleworking. So we are looking at that with the place of performance rule. Again, we're not to the point of coming out one way or the other of where we're going, because we're still in the beginning stages of working on that. So I don't have an answer for you today on this.
Shannon, we have Ryan put in our chat that Washington CARES Act is a long-term care law that is just coming into effect in Washington on January 1st.
Yeah, like I said, there are two different things, Washington CARES Act and then Paid Family Medical Leave, and how does that all intertwine and work, especially with teleworkers working from home in another state. So we're still looking at how that impacts for Oregon for the Paid Family Medical Leave program.
Thank you. Joanne, do you have any follow-up to that?
No, thank you, ladies. I'm good.
All right, thank you. Then we will, I believe we only have one left, and that would be Sharon. And will wages be reported in a different column from the UI wages?
Hi, Sharon. Yes, the Paid Family Medical Leave will have its own column on the combined quarterly payroll report, because the wages could be different for UI and Paid Family Medical Leave.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure.
Yep.
Thank you.
Great question.
Okay, so that looks like all of, Elaine just put in Washington CARES is for individuals to get assistance, usually after they have retired, but all employees working in Washington must contribute regardless of where they live. If they work in Washington, however, only residents of Washington can claim benefits. Thank you, Elaine. We appreciate that feedback. I don't have any more questions.
And there is a question from Andrea in the chat that you might want to take a look at.
Yeah, it was me just asking Shannon, you said it and then someone mentioned it, but I missed it, back on the reporting requirements about what you're doing with the individual data. And it kind of like blended together for me. So if you could restate that, that would be great. There was like a question about tracking kind of like utilization, or like being able to, I think our comment was more about being able to sort of identify where there might be sort of barriers to utilization or disparate kind of impact. And you had mentioned something about tracking individual data.
Is that on the rule that reporting requirement rule? And I think you the feedback was additional data points or elements that we could maybe get from that information. Yeah, we're looking at multiple different data points of what's reported on how much the contributions were, the benefits paid, the financial costs, who was approved and denied. So we're looking at those data points, but if you can think of other ones that you think that we should add, we're more than willing to explore all other data points as well. But those are the ones that we could think of at the moment. But we're not just using just that. I mean, there's other stuff that we're looking at as well.
Yeah, those seemed good to me. I just wasn't sure when someone kind of flagged that for me in particular, if there was another question there. Thanks.
Yeah. I thank everybody for the feedback that we received today and at last Thursday's RAC meeting. There was some themes today about reporting the information annually instead of within 30 days of the anniversary date. And I just wanted to comment, some of the reason that we did that is because we're allowing individuals to elect into the equivalent plan at any time throughout the year and not just at the annually. And so people are going to have different election periods. Some might start with the equivalent plan in January, some might start in May, some might start in August. And so doing a year from that is the idea that we were thinking about there. But we'll continue to explore the feedback that we received today. So thank you. All right. So does the RAC members have any additional questions or comments after the public comment period? Thoughts, concerns? Okay. So we're going to the next slide then. So just as a reminder, when we proceed to the formal rulemaking for batch 2 administrative rules, we'll be asking for public comments there as well. And there'll be public hearings scheduled. Notices will be posted on our website and through the Secretary of State's Oregon Bulletin, and they'll be sent out through our listserv for interested parties. People can sign up to receive notices for our rulemaking on our rulemaking webpage, so you are alerted each time we have paid family medical leave rules ready for formal rulemaking. We anticipate a version of these batch 2 administrative rules will be published in the Oregon Bulletin on February 1st of 2022. The 2 public hearings for the batch 2 administrative rules we have scheduled tentatively for February 23rd from 3 to 5 p.m. and February 28th from 9 to 11 a.m. We tried to choose different times of the day to accommodate different work schedules. So also on these slides are some important dates about the paid family medical leave batch 1 administrative rules that are currently in the formal rulemaking process. Remember, batch 1 rules consist of wage definitions, paid family medical leave contributions, self-employed, small employer assistant grants, and our outreach rule. So mark your calendars now before you forget. The next public hearing for the batch 1 rules is this Thursday, December 9th from 4 to 6 p.m. We need to receive all public comments for batch 1 administrative rules by 5 p.m. on December 20th, if you'd like your comment or comments to be considered. You can sign up for public comments or see the draft rules on our at the OED website listed at the first bullet point here on this slide. You can find information about the paid family medical leave program on our webpage in the second bullet. And you can email your questions or comments to the OED_rules@employee.oregon.gov. And I just wanted to say that we really appreciate all of your time you have dedicated and the feedback we received during these 2 last RAC meetings and the written feedback that we have received or we're going to continue to receive. Because of your assistance and feedback, these administrative rules will be wrapped up with a little sparkle and shine in a red bow for the formal rulemaking process that will begin on February 1st. Truly, we have really appreciated all of your assistance and expertise, as this couldn't have been done without all of you guys working together. So we really appreciate it. And I thank you guys all for your time. If we have nothing further, the RAC meeting will end today.
Seeing no other questions or comments or any raised hands from our RAC members, I'm going to officially end this RAC meeting. Thank you, everybody, and have a great day.